What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my main man, Steven Thompson. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they're working through another week trying to rebound from back-to-back losses against some pretty poor teams as they prepare for the Indianapolis Colts. Got some pretty big injury news with TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith returning to practice yesterday, but still a wait and see work in progress situation going on there. Meanwhile, a very big NFL insider, a very important name when it comes to Mike Tomlin and Mike Tomlin news, proposed a trade to possibly send the coach over to the NFC. We'll dive into that. Plus, another NFL insider believes that the Pittsburgh Steelers should target a quarterback in the first round of the NFL draft. We'll talk about options there, if it's the right move for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and if they could possibly wait to try to fill other voids while waiting to grab a quarterback. It's a beautiful day out here in the Burgh. City of Pittsburgh seems nice and lively, which is, I mean, at this point in the year, it's just one week. I think if you go back through our podcasts, you could go every other week. It's either freezing cold and miserable or a beautiful day in the Burgh. Either way, how you feeling, my friend?
I feel good. It's our kind of extended long weekend here makes it feel like it's been a while since we've talked. It's that Thursday game really throws off your schedule. So glad to be back.
Yeah, I feel you there. It's weird. It's the weird type of our time of football season. Like, I had buddies texting me yesterday, and they're like, why are there 2 Monday nights, or 2 days ago now? Today's Wednesday. Doesn't feel like Wednesday. 2 days ago, they're texting me, why is there Monday Night Football? Why are there 2 Monday Night Football games? Then I had to explain to them that Saturday football is a thing from here on out. It just feels like the NFL is just throwing everybody through a loop, but it's all right because football seemingly doesn't end, and I'm kicked out of the fantasy football playoffs, so I'm not really complaining there. Yeah, I know. That's terrible. Tough. It was awful. I went from, let me explain this, and I might have explained this earlier, but I started 5-0 in this league, okay? Was killing it. Jalen Hurts was my quarterback. Tyreek Hill was my wide receiver. I had every Miami Dolphins player there possibly was. It was a great time. And then all of a sudden, I just start losing and losing and losing, and I finished the year 5-9 after starting 5-0. Dead last in my league. Went from 5-0 to dead last in my league. Yeah, it was a rough time. The worst part about it, though, is I'm the commissioner. So I have, in my Venmo account, is just like everybody's money. And it just sits there until I have to send it to somebody else at the end of the year. Yeah.
It just taunts you. It sits there taunting you every day.
Every day I stare at it. And like, years past, you like put it in your bank account and then you spend it because you don't think about it. And then you're like, oh, all right, well, I just got to try to win. I do that every year and I've never won. I've made the playoffs twice in this league. It's a tough time. You ever come to me for fantasy football advice? My best advice is don't, because I'm really bad. I'm just really, really bad at fantasy football. That being said, let's dive into some possible trades that I should have made in fantasy football that maybe the Pittsburgh Steelers should make this offseason. NFL insider Jay Glazer, who, if you followed the Pittsburgh Steelers, if you're close in the news or around the news of Mike Tomlin, you understand that of all the NFL insiders, Jay Glazer has a very strong relationship with Mike Tomlin, has always had a very good hand and a very good idea about the news when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers head coach. He said that while he thinks that Mike Tomlin could be traded tomorrow and that he's not totally sure that the Steelers are looking to get rid of Mike Tomlin at this point, he did say if you're a team looking for a head coach, you should make a phone call. He dropped the Washington Commanders as a name to watch for that potential trade. And again, if anybody else says this, it's nothing. It's no big deal. Who cares? But Jay Glazer comes out and starts dropping names about potential trades and the possibility of Mike Tomlin actually heading somewhere else. You kind of feel like you have to listen. You hear this, you hear the Washington Commanders. There's every bit of this that we'll dive into, including what it's going to cost and what the compensation is and if it makes sense and how the Pittsburgh Steelers replace them. But the big question, obviously, to start here, I mean, do you take this with as much credibility, I guess, as most are taking it because it's Jay Glazer making their proposed trade.
Yeah, I mean, sure, I do, but also, I mean, I don't think Glazer said anything super groundbreaking necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't reporting that, oh, the Washington Commanders are interested in Mike Tomlin. He was just saying this would probably be a good idea for a team that's, probably going to move on from their head coach at the end of this year. It's going to, has some talent that they might want to capitalize on right now. Like, trading for Mike Tomlin is not the worst idea in the world for this team. So you give it credibility in the fact that it's maybe a decent idea, and maybe Glazer's just kind of doing Mike Tomlin some favors, planting the seed in some people's minds. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do kind of believe him and think that this is a good idea, or at least an idea worth thinking about as well. Because I mean, it would kind of it. There's two different ways for both of these organizations to go. If you're Washington and Pittsburgh, when you're approaching this trade, but it seems at least there's an argument to be made for this trade in the first place for both of these sides. Both of them can kind of benefit, and it's not it's not the silliest idea in the world.
No, it definitely is not. It's crazy because Washington, every time the Mike Tomlin trade situation like comes about, Washington is the name to watch every single time. I remember a couple of years ago, it was the first time I ever heard about trading a coach. Like, as a fan from afar, you don't really think that's a real thing. We never grew up in an era where you traded a coach. I was sitting in the press box, or I was sitting in the conference room back in the day when it was still in the facility. It's like my first year there or something. And it's near the trade deadline. And all these rumors, these speculations start coming out of Mike Tomlin being traded from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and which is hilarious because we just continue to run the same cycles all the time with the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, and this is a prime example of that. But all those speculations start coming out. Somebody from, I don't know, the Washington Post or somewhere shows up in Pittsburgh. He's sitting right in front of me. I remember I had no idea who this guy was. Everybody did. I was still new to the journalism game, so, my apologies. Probably a big name. Probably should have known who it was. I'm sitting there behind him. Everybody's asking random questions, just like, boom, injury updates, quarterback situation, blah, 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 blah. This guy at the end of the press conference, starts talking, and he says something like, I don't remember the exact words, but it was something like, what are your thoughts on the speculations of being traded to the Washington Commanders? And my eyes, like, I wish there was a camera because I was just like, what? What are you talking about, pal? And Tomlin blew it right off. Obviously, I don't think he gave him two words. And we moved on. But I think it's hilarious that it's always Washington, or at least has been Washington, which starts to make you believe maybe it does make more sense, and maybe there are more people talking about this than should be. When it comes to the actual Glazer thing, yeah, I agree. Like, it was more just, if you want to start thinking about it, this is where you should start thinking about it. What's it cost? You send Mike Tomlin anywhere. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, what are you looking for? If you're another team and you're sitting around thinking, I need Mike Tomlin, what are you giving up for a guy who hasn't won many playoff games in the last 10 years, hasn't won a Super Bowl in quite some time, but has produced, 17 winning seasons? What are you giving up, and what are you asking for Mike Tomlin?
Well, I think this is an interesting exercise because it's measuring like results, I think, versus reputation. And I think Mike Tomlin has a better reputation outside of Pittsburgh right now than he has in it, and probably has for a while.
Yeah.
So, you look at some of the coaches you've gotten traded before. Like Sean Payton, John Gruden. Like, I think Mike Tomlin, at least his reputation and what other teams think of him as, is closer to like those guys. Closer to, people think pretty highly of him outside of Pittsburgh still, and I think that could carry things a long way. As much as people in Pittsburgh love to gripe about the results, I think people outside of Pittsburgh look at it more as, oh, Mike Tomlin did such a great job, winning seasons and all that with imperfect rosters. So I still think if you're the Steelers, you start and end the conversation at a first round pick plus, a later round pick in the future. That kind of seems to be, I mean, there aren't many coaching trades to draw on, and I know every situation is different. But you look at the past, you look at history. That's kind of the going rate for a coach of Tomlin's caliber with that kind of resume. It's a first round pick in the following year, and then the year after it's a later round pick. So if you're the Steelers, I don't think you can afford to, or you shouldn't, at least even consider going any lower than that, because I mean, you may like I said, we may not think very highly of him right now, but I can assure you the rest of the league definitely does.
Yeah, 100%. You leave the city of Pittsburgh. I mean, we both have dads that are into sports, and every time I talk to my dad, every single time my dad calls me and we're just talking football, he's always constantly reminding me that Tomlin is just a phenomenal head coach. And he's like, oh yeah, he's like, I can't believe Steelers fans are this angry. I'm like, I get it, but I also get that, the Denver Broncos haven't been good in a long time, so you're seeing it from a different perspective. The Washington Commanders haven't been good in a long time, so they're seeing it from a different perspective. Mike Tomlin to these guys is, I mean, a godsend. This guy would change the organization. He doesn't even have to take him to a Super Bowl. He's just got to change the organization. But at the same time, I think that if Tomlin ends up somewhere else, like think of the culture shift that happens in another place and how like a fresh culture shift can actually improve that team. Like you go to a team with a bunch of talent who doesn't have a strong culture. Tomlin walks in there and changes the culture and everybody gets on him because they see the results. I think that's the biggest difference is in Pittsburgh, they have a higher bar and they're not meeting that bar, so people are starting to look at it as the players, everybody are starting to look at it and saying, why can't we hit this bar? What is wrong with this bar? They're getting upset that's causing issues. Somewhere else, the bar is, if this is the Steelers bar, this is other team's bar. Tomlin could get here in 2 minutes. It'd take him a week before that team is at that bar. And then you got everybody in that building believing in this guy and thinking that he's going to turn this around. That culture explodes. That's how you go win a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? That's when people talk about a fresh face and everything, that's the culture change that you would want if you're another team. I agree. I think it starts with a first round pick. I think it's more, like the Sean Payton thing I got, but like he also was out of the league for a couple of years. And to be quite honest, he didn't have the success that Mike Tomlin's had in the NFL. Like he's had a lot of success, ton of success, but Tomlin's got 2 Super Bowl. I guess Payton's got 2 Super Bowl appearances too, right? Or just the one?
I think, no, he has 2, I'm pretty sure, because didn't he lose one to...
Yeah, he lost one to Peyton Manning. Yeah, you're right. So they both have 2. So I guess they are on the same pedestal there. First round pick, I mean, that's easy where they start. What did Denver get? Just a first round pick and then a future...
Yeah, they got like a future, like, I don't know if it was like a second.
It was, but it was like right there. It was like second to fourth. Like it wasn't super low. I think you're right.
Oh, no, it was the second round. It was a 2024 second round.
There you go. Wow. I think that's the bar that you set. I think it's at least a first and a second round pick. I think from there you see what you could get. Now the question is, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, are you taking that? Like if Washington calls you at the end of the season, you don't make the playoffs. Let's act as if the Steelers lose the next 4 games. You don't make the playoffs. Washington calls you. Hey, here's a first and a second round pick. We just want Mike Tomlin. You taking that trade? And I mean, clear as day, actually. Are you taking that trade?
I'm really tempted to say yes because it feels like, I don't know. It feels like they're going to move on from Mike Tomlin. I mean, I don't know. I have nothing to base that on. It's just kind of vibes and what I feel. But I feel like they're going to move on from Mike Tomlin at the end of the year anyway. So it's kind of a trade him while he has value type of thing instead of a let him walk for nothing. So, I mean, I think it kind of comes down to whether or not if you're Art Rooney, you are considering bringing him back next year. Like that's. I mean, if you're going to get rid of him, you might as well trade him. I mean, as far as this seems like a fair deal if you're going to do it. I'll put it that way. So, like, if you did put him on the trade block and this was the offer for him, I'd absolutely take that. I mean, shoot, that's going to be. I think right now that's a top 4 pick. It's like the number. I think that's where the Commanders sit right now. Like, are you kidding me? Do you know what the Steelers could do with that? Like, they could
get a quarterback.
Right. Yeah, they could, but like they could do so many things with that in their next pick, and then getting another pick on top of that maybe in the future. Like I don't know if you can really pass up that kind of opportunity.
No, I think I agree. Like what you could do with that is because you keep your first round pick, and if the Steelers continue to lose, like they're a top 15 pick at this point. They're sitting like the 10 to 15 range. Could you imagine having the fourth pick in the draft and maybe like the 13th pick in the draft, and then knowing that you have to go next year and you get 2 second-round picks, and it doesn't even matter if Tomlin turns it around, like that's still a second-round pick. Is it worth the, in your eyes, is Tomlin and his philosophy and everything that's going on with the Pittsburgh Steelers irreversible enough to where it's worth having to find a new coach? Because I think people have like this worry, and I think that's the argument people are starting to make. I've seen it all over social media. I've heard it on the radio. I've seen it on ESPN and everywhere else, that there is this argument of, well, what if your next head coach sucks? I'm somebody who's like, I don't think anybody in the NFL is sitting around going, man, we shouldn't make a move because what if that guy sucks? Like, I don't think that NFL teams think that way. I think they think optimistically and like, this guy could be the next guy. Do you think that that's a real, like, do you think that thought's there? Like, do you think that the thought of a first round pick, even if it is a top 5 pick, being worth the risk of your next offense or your next head coach not being the guy, even though Mike Tomlin has not led you to much postseason success in the last, zero postseason success in the last like 6-7 years?
Yeah, I've heard this argument too, and I don't know. This is like really simplistic, but my counter argument would be just kind of don't hire a bad coach. Like I don't know, like
That's what I'm saying.
I don't think that reality is like baked into the notion of firing Tomlin. Like you don't have to hire a bad coach if you fire Mike Tomlin, you know?
Yep.
And so I would say, to answer your question, like, yeah, I think that is worth the risk. I would just, if I'm the Steelers and I'm going to do this, I'm not going to live in my fears, quite on to borrow Tomlinism. I'm not going to live in the fear of not being able to hire a good coach. I'm going to make the best hire I can and kind of have faith in that. I don't think you do this. I don't think you avoid making a move because you don't trust yourself to hire someone good. That feels completely wrong to me.
Yeah, the using a Tomlinism to describe how the Steelers should probably move on from Mike Tomlin if the opportunity presented itself that was a move right there. That was smooth. I agree. I don't live in that fear. I don't think any NFL team lives in that fear. I don't think anybody in the NFL is sitting around going, man, we've gone through a dozen interviews. We cut our candidates down to 2 guys, but we're pretty positive they're both going to suck. We're very nervous that neither of these guys are going to be good. I don't think anybody sits around and does it. In like worst case scenario, man, just go get a veteran who's got like 2-3 years left in his, go hire Bill Belichick, tell Bill to come over to Pittsburgh and come hang out and just go hire everybody else around him and just see if it works. Who cares? But I agree. I don't know. I don't want to say situation to monitor, but definitely something to start wrapping your brain around and considering as a possibility for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because I'm sure that teams will actually call in the offseason, especially if things start going wrong. And Steelers would never like make it known that Tomlin's on the hot seat, but the national media will ramp that story up. And if that happens, teams will start to make some phone calls. Guys, we have gear. New merchandise from AST to Muth, Bleed Black and Gold, Kenny to George, and plenty of others now at our new website, blackandgoldapparel.com. And the coolest part, 50% of all profits at our store go to UPMC Children's Hospital here in Pittsburgh to make sure that we are giving back. We can't thank you guys enough, and we want to show you guys how thankful and how grateful we are for everything by making sure that we do our part to make the community here in Pittsburgh better. Go check out everything. We tried to make everything new and improved, from our designs to our quality of sweatshirts and t-shirts and everything else. Let us know and check everything out at blackandgoldapparel.com. And as always, thank you guys for everything. The other big news from an NFL insider this week, Peter King was talking on 93.7 The Fan. He said that he believes the Pittsburgh Steelers should bring in some competition for Kenny Pickett during the NFL draft. We talked about Jaden Daniels as a possibility. We kind of decided collectively that Justin Fields might be a better option than Jaden Daniels if those opportunities presented itself. He's saying a first-round pick. He named a guy like Bo Nix as a possibility for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Two questions here for you. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and you only have one first-round pick, are you spending it on a quarterback? Are you considering spending it on the quarterback? And do you think that the quarterback options where the Steelers sit are going to be good enough to kind of like, I don't know, move the bar a little bit or teeter the whatever the tot or whatever the thing is, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
About
I get you. Tip the scales.
Tip the scales, thank you, on enough to warrant the move.
So I think I don't hate the idea of taking a quarterback at all. But I think the first round would be a little early, especially considering how deep this quarterback class is. Like when you think about the difference between, I don't know, like take your pick of random quarterbacks who are going to maybe go in the first round. Like right now, it's like, I mean, I've seen Penix in there. I've seen Jaden Daniels get a lot of shine recently after he won the Heisman. Bo Nix, a guy you mentioned. Like the difference between guys like that versus a Quinn Ewers or a Carson Beck or a JJ McCarthy, like how different is it, you know? And so I think if you're the Steelers, if you are also, I mean, look, if we're full blown, you know, Kenny's not the guy and we've got to panic and we don't feel like we have a franchise quarterback, then by all means go for it in the first round. Take your home run swing on a quarterback there because you need it. If you don't think Kenny's the guy, but if you think Kenny even has the potential to be a serviceable starter, then I think you wait until the second or maybe even the third, because this is just such a quality quarterback draft class that you can afford to wait a little bit, in my opinion, and still get a guy who's competent and then get a guy who can win you some games and be a good starter for you. So unless unless we're really hitting the panic button on this whole thing, if we're firing Mike Tomlin and we're getting rid of Kenny Pickett, we don't think that either of those guys are it, then yeah, let's take a swing on Jaden Daniels or something at pick whatever 15, 11, 12, wherever the Steelers end up. But for right now, given where they stand, and I'm someone who's not completely out on Kenny Pickett yet, so I'm saying if you are drafting a quarterback, it's got to be depth, it's got to be competition. It's not necessarily taking a swing on a guy that you think is going to be an actual franchise quarterback, and you're not. You know, I don't think you introduce that kind of. You know, I don't think you may. I don't know. I don't think you use that kind of draft capital unless you think that you need a franchise quarterback and that you can get one in that first round.
I agree. I don't think that you're bringing in a first-round guy, especially a top 15, top 20 pick, and saying, well, you know, worst-case scenario, this guy spends his career behind Kenny Pickett. That's like, that's worse than drafting Kenny Pickett. That's as bad as it gets. Like, if it's okay to admit that Kenny isn't the guy after you gave him an opportunity. It's not okay to have two first-round quarterbacks sitting there competing with each other and saying, well, there's a possibility that the guy we drafted higher than Kenny Pickett, after we realized Kenny Pickett might not be it, is also not the guy. That would be worst case scenario for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, again, if Kenny comes back at the end of the season and the Steelers make the playoffs, and in those last two games, Kenny looks atrocious, and in those two games, you just make the decision, it's over, we're not going to stick with Kenny Pickett this offseason, then you draft a first-round quarterback and you feel just fine. But like you said, this draft is so deep. You could find a Michael Penix. You can make a move up. You know what I mean? Like if you have a guy in mind, that guy is there in the top of the second round or in the early portions of the second round, go up and get him. Like, you know, it's not that hard to move up after the first round. You could make that move to go get a quarterback if you want to, or you could sit around and just draft somebody that you feel is competent enough to come in here and help. The Steelers have too many options, or too many issues. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, you need a right tackle, you need a center, you probably need another wide receiver somewhere. You need an inside linebacker, unless Cole Holcomb and Elandon Roberts and unless everybody's coming back and they're healthy. You probably need a safety. You definitely need a corner. Like there are a lot of you need to fill these positions immediately for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Quarterback is definitely on the list. Should be very high on the list. Not worth a first round pick when you could fill a void. You know what I mean? Like you draft a right tackle, that right tackle is your right tackle. There's no questions there. You draft a corner, that's your corner. There's no questions there. You draft a quarterback, it's like, well, we might have just wasted a first round pick, but you never know. We could get better. And then what do you do with Kenny Pickett? Like I think that's the other side of this is if you draft a first round quarterback, everything for Kenny Pickett goes lower. Whereas if you draft a second round quarterback, Kenny Pickett's stock remains high, maybe not as high, but it remains higher than it was. And if at some point along the way you've decided Kenny is not your guy, I still think he holds some trade value to move on from. Whereas if you draft Bo Nix, you're getting remember Josh Rosen, that you're getting Josh Rosen value for Kenny Pickett, which is nothing. And at that point, that's just wasted compensation. Do you think there's a chance that if they do draft a quarterback and he beats Kenny Pickett out next season, that they actually like move on from Kenny, that they move him somewhere else?
Oh yeah. I mean, totally. Like, I mean, that feels like the kind of logical next step. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like you could get better value. You could get better value than what Kenny would bring you as a backup if you traded him. Because he still had. I mean, like as much as we all don't really, as we've kind of been critical of Kenny Pickett at certain points, like I think it's kind of. I think he has a better reputation outside of Pittsburgh, and I definitely think that you could find a team out there who suffers an injury to a starting quarterback and needs someone who can step in and be serviceable for them around a good team. I think that could absolutely happen. Probably should happen. I mean, if you find a new franchise quarterback, I think you got to try to maximize Kenny Pickett's value to you, and he does not hold a ton of value to you as a backup. I think that's kind of a little bit of a waste. Not only like a waste of his talents, quite honestly. Like I said, like I'm not as out on Kenny Pickett as maybe some other people are. But I think he doesn't really give you anything. Like you invested too much in him for him to be a backup. Like if he's not going to start for you, then you gotta get rid of him, and you gotta get some better value for him that way.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I don't think it's worth having. I think Kenny's a good guy. I don't think Kenny would ever be an issue in the locker room. But I also don't think that like morale wise, it's good, especially for a guy who you see miss open wide receivers, who you've seen lack confidence on a football field in his decision making. It's not going to be great to bench him and then one day have to rely on him and say, all right, Kenny, go ahead. Go see what you like.
We believe in you, buddy. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like I just don't think that works out in that situation. It's better to just go get a veteran and say, all right, well, like this guy's expectation, go get Tyrod Taylor and say, worst case scenario, you're in there and you'll be just fine. Or like Jacoby, a career backup who doesn't hold that bar. Cause I think then Kenny, like it starts to, and then, it becomes a giant question mark. To go full circle here before we head out. Washington Commanders call. They hold the 4th pick in the draft, okay? Washington Commanders call. They say, hey, we want Mike Tomlin. We'll give you a first and a second next year. You say, all right, the Steelers hold a top 15 pick, whatever. Are you taking that? And this is during the draft, okay? During the draft. Caleb Williams goes first. Let's see what the draft order looks like right this very second. The draft order.
I believe it's
Patriots are at second. Okay, so they're taking a quarterback.
Drake May, baby.
Let's say the Bears do not, okay? Say the Bears don't take a quarterback. Number 2, New England Patriots, whoever they pick. Number 3, Arizona Cardinals, don't take a quarterback. Let's say best case scenario for the Pittsburgh Steelers happen. They're sitting there at 4, either Drake May or Caleb Williams sitting on the board for these guys. Washington Commanders call you. Hey, we want Mike Tomlin. We'll give you this we'll give you the 4th pick and next year's 2nd. Done deal. Are you taking that pick and drafting Caleb Williams / Drake May? Or are you going a different direction?
I mean, if Caleb Williams or Drake May are there, I mean, those I feel like are, obviously don't expect them to be there, but those are like game-changing offensive talents, I feel like. So, franchise cornerstone type guys. So, I mean, shoot, even if they aren't there, I would take this deal. Like, I don't know, like, I don't know that I don't think it's dependent on whether or not a quarterback is there. I mean, I would take Drake May or Caleb Williams. I feel like would be pretty obvious upgrades over Kenny Pickett, but
Are you drafting a quarterback in that situation though? Like, say one of the does that remove all question of Kenny Pickett competition, blah blah blah? Like, if that scenario presents itself, is it all right? It's over. Tomlin, Kenny, done. This is a new era of Pittsburgh Steelers football. Welcome Drake May and new head coach Bill Belichick. Not actually, but you know.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I mean, I don't hate that. I mean, I don't. I mean, I think you'd have to know what the rest of the roster looks like. Like, I don't. Man, this is tough,
right?
Because I mean, still, like throwing Drake May behind that line or throwing Caleb Williams behind that line, like, is not ideal either. And you
still got a first round pick. You still have like your first round pick.
Yeah, I'm probably considering. Yeah, I fine. I'll throw myself into it. I'll say yes. I feel like that's too sweet of a deal to pass up to get a 4th overall pick on top of a 15th overall pick, and maybe give yourself a fresh start and a hard reset that this organization. I don't know if they need it, but I don't think it could hurt them, quite honestly. Yep. So yeah, I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna plant my flag. I'm gonna say yes. I would take that deal.
I 100% agree with you. If Washington calls, and Washington's only a game back from like the Patriots, I believe, and the Cardinals. You sit there, you know what I mean? You somehow climb your way to 2, 3. Washington calls, hey, look, we want Mike Tomlin. Yeah, cool. Sounds good, pal. There, see ya. We appreciate all the work. We'll figure it out from here. You get one of those quarterbacks. You trade Kenny Pickett immediately. I wish both these guys all the best in this situation, but you trade Kenny Pickett immediately. You see if you could get a 2nd round pick for the guy, or maybe a 3rd, and then boom, you just stack everywhere else as much as you can throughout the rest of the draft around your new quarterback. Yeah, no, I'm feeling pretty all right about that. And I think if you told 100 Steelers fans, 80 of them would be like, you're nuts if you don't take that deal. So, I mean, if you told 100 Washington fans, 100 of them say, we'll take Mike Tomlin immediately. So 2 sides of the coin, but I'm all in on that move, 100%. With that said, we'll see what happens in April. But for right now, the Pittsburgh Steelers are just trying to win some football games. We're heading out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, find all of our work at allsteelers.com and all of our pit coverage at InsideThePanthers.com. We will be back on Friday to go through Steelers Indianapolis Week 15. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.